Kathy Wrench with Quinsigamond Community College near Boston, Massachusetts, and also the 2020 president of the NCATC Board of Directors. On behalf of the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers Board of Directors and our many industry strategic partners, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. NCATC focuses its work around 4 pillars. The first is the future of workforce in Industry 4.0. The second is work-based learning, apprenticeships to entrepreneurship. The third is competency-based learning and industry-recognized credentials. And the fourth is adult education and learning opportunities. To a certain degree, today's presentation will touch on all 4 pillars, while focusing on how we all may safely reopen our ATC and CTE hands-on training labs during the COVID-19 pandemic in a quality way for all of our students and faculty. We are so pleased to bring you the first webinar in this series at no charge to non-member colleges. But we do have 2 other webinars that will only be free to our members. NCATC members receive several benefits, including a great network of other advanced technology centers to network and share best practices with. We will be highlighting one of those partners today with Gateway Technical College. We also provide external grant evaluation plus technical assistance for NSF, ATE, and member assistance programs, consulting that can help align your college with industry in your area and ensure you're on the right track to provide the educational opportunities to build your pipeline and workforce in your region. For more information, please send us your information in the question box to chat with your name and email and college name. Now it's my pleasure to introduce NCATC's Executive Director and CEO, Craig McAtee, for some brief housekeeping comments.
Thanks, Kathy, so much, and thanks for your leadership and passion around all that we're trying to do before and after this pandemic. We're delighted to have Craig Lamb from Rowan Cabarrus Community College in North Carolina with us today to moderate our webinar. We also have Tony Neary from the Haas Morris Group based in Cleveland, Ohio, managing our question box. So anything you type there will be made sure that it gets to us in the question and answer period later in the session today. Both Tony and Craig also serve on our board of directors, and we're very thrilled to have them in those positions and being part of today's webinar. Last but certainly not least, today's webinar is sponsored by NCATC's newest strategic partner, EASE Incorporated. They'll share our timely and important information about their COVID-19 auditing solutions for education at the end of our webinar, actually after the panelists today. And they'll have a very special offer for anybody that's registered on the webinar today. So look for that when their presentation comes up. So before we begin, I'd like to point out that today's webinar will be recorded. Actually is being recorded as we look, and that recording and the slide deck will be part of what we share with all the registrants next week via our website and in the new normal 2.0 section. So remember, you can always check out the most current activities, events, and best practices by visiting at ncatc.org. A reminder, at the end of today's presentation, we will have time for Q&A. Before then, of course, as I mentioned, if you have something come up that's not being covered, just type it in the question box, and Tony will share that with our panel a little later on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Craig Lamb. Craig is the Vice President of our Corporate and Continuing Education Division at Rowan Cabarrus Community College. They're part of the North Carolina statewide community college system. And Craig is responsible for overseeing the development of delivery of training programs and services in support of business growth and workforce development, as well as the continuing education program, including public safety, adult basic skills, industrial consulting, and skill development. Before he was with Rowan Cabarrus in 2014, he was also the executive director for Ivy Tech's Corporate College, overseeing many initiatives over a 10-county region for Indiana, over almost 2 decades. Craig was elected to the NCATC Board of Directors just last year and hit the ground running with fresh, innovative ideas for our members in January of this year. So Craig, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you all for attending today's webinar.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to have an opportunity to share our panelists with you today. We're excited to have 4 knowledgeable presenters today representing a variety of perspectives on how colleges will return to in-person instruction for hands-on labs. They'll each be providing a brief overview of their role or perspective. We'll have a short presentation from our webinar sponsor, followed by an interactive Q&A session with our panelists. You're encouraged to post your questions to the question box so we can get them posted to our panelists. Right now, I'll go ahead and introduce all 4 panelists in the order that they'll present, and then we'll get down to business. Our first presenter is Dan Ramirez, and Dan is the Associate Director of NC3. Dan joined the National Coalition of Certification Centers in early 2012 as Director of Strategic Marketing and Development. Mr. Ramirez has served in several various marketing, business, development, and engineering capacities and enjoys a rich background in the transportation, aerospace, aviation, and energy industries. Most recently, Dan served as Director of Innovation at Snap-on. Our second presenter will be Bruce Donato. Bruce is a principal with K&A First Aid and Safety, providing safety consulting and emergency preparedness services for many industries. He holds a BSc in chemical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and has over 35 years of industrial experience. He's worked in the federal government and for chemical, textile, and biotechnology companies, including DuPont, Hoechst Celanese, and Life Technologies. Mr. Donato is a certified safety professional, a certified hazardous materials manager, a certified ergonomics compliance director, an emergency responder instructor, and instructor trainer for the American Heart Association and the American Safety Institute. Our third presenter will be Ray Kakari, and Ray is the Dean of Academic Affairs for the SC Johnson IMET Center and the Dean for the School of Manufacturing, Engineering, and Information Technology at Gateway Technical College in Wisconsin. Ray started his career at Gateway as an adjunct faculty member teaching IT courses. He became a full faculty member in August of 2004 on the Racine campus. In January 2018, Ray became the Dean of the School of Manufacturing, Engineering, and Information Technology. This is a new position that was created to address the changes in manufacturing and the arrival of Foxconn. Matt Janison has been the Vice President of Business and Workforce Solution Division at Gateway Technical College in Kenosha, Wisconsin since January 2018. His primary role is to oversee outreach to business and industry, apprenticeship, customized training, business partnerships, Gateway's boot camp training programs, the Fab Lab, and dual credit opportunities at local academy high schools. The work done in Business and Workforce Solutions connects many aspects of the college and its mission to business and industry and facilitates deeper relationships. Businesses are served through short-term customized training to fill their immediate needs, but then connected to the academic programs to ensure that they have a pipeline of talent to grow and prosper. So I'm sure as you hear our presenters today, you'll want to be sure to check out their LinkedIn profiles and connect with them when you have an opportunity to do that. And I'm sure they'll be glad to hear from you as well. Dan, will you kick off with the first presentation?
You bet. Thank you so much, Craig and the two Craigs and the entire NCATC team. Thanks so much for hosting this conference and inviting NC3 to be a part of it. It's been very interesting, and we've gotten to a point where we've developed, I think, all of us a pretty good perspective on how things are emerging and maybe what the future is beginning to look like as we head into the first full semester of programming for our CTE programs post coronavirus introduction. So we're glad to be here today, share some of our insights, and answer any questions you all have from our perspective and what we're seeing out there and help plan for that future. So just a word about NC3. So we're an organization, for those of you who don't know us, we're a nonprofit. Our work is to develop industry-based certifications and help implement those at NCTE programs at post-secondary and secondary level across the country. Our roots started in post-secondary, Gateway Technology, Gateway Technical College being our very first member, and still our flagship school, implementing almost all of our certifications across the country. Where we've been in the last 4 or so months since March, middle of March, when everything came to the new normal, the old normal, came to a screeching halt for almost all of us, right? You know, for CTE programs across the country, we focused on that immediate need when classes were shut down, campuses were closed, helping our CTE instructors across the country, along with our industry partners, flip their classrooms and provide them CTE learning. I would say now we have shifted that focus and are really helping schools reopen and plan for that new normal future. And we'd like to talk a little bit about that, and are thankful for the opportunity to do that as I believe the fog begins to lift, particularly over the last 30 days. I think 30 days ago, I think we would have said, wow, we're pretty much heading back to programs being more traditional in the way they were pre-COVID. And I think the last 30 days or so has really helped us probably get a grip on what the new normal is going to be. And from our perspective, and we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe there are some great things that are going to happen there. So thank you again, Craig and NCATC for inviting us. We'll go to the next slide. There are three, as we meet today in the panel, three things we've observed and wanted to address and get a chance to do a deeper dive with the participants today. You know, the first has to do with what are the long-term effects that are happening, and maybe not being able to have in-person labs in the springtime. You know, a lot of those have to shut down. So here's our perspective. In-person labs are absolutely critical for CTE learning. Right now, even as we look at going back to campus in the next really 30 days or so for most of our programs, right? Every single program that we know of is planning in-person lab activity. To offer a CTE program without hands-on is going to be challenging. We don't know a single company that's going to hire a welder who just has learned virtually how to weld, right? Or an aviation technician, an A&P technician who hasn't passed their FAA training and has worked on planes and done those labs. So that is going to be a critical element. I don't think that part is going to change. What is going to change is the fact that I think, you know, 30 days ago, up to probably 30 days ago, we were thinking, well, this is kind of a blip in our educational standard, you know, our educational processes. I think we're all coming to grips with the fact that that what we're experiencing now is probably going to be with us for a little while, and we're going to have to get on board and adjust to that. So the good news is, you know, we see the long-term nature of this crisis causing some probably good permanent change that some of us might have thought, you know, that what I thought would have been a good idea anyhow. So we do see an opportunity here with flexibly scheduled classes, and lab activities, right, that in some hybrid flexible ways that may actually end up improving CTE education in the months and years ahead. So we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please. We also would like to we have a pretty good perspective. We ourselves have been subjected to, normally this summer, we probably last week would have been in Kenosha hosting our biggest Train the Trainer and having instructors from across the country join us. And so we ourselves have had to flip our training. And it was a real challenge for us because we really count on that, on developing those intimate training experiences that are highly relational driven. And so we have we've had an opportunity to ourselves experience in developing the program and flip our own sessions. And I think we've come away with some high level takeaways from that. And some of that is actually remote training is superior in some ways, right? There can often be more focus, fewer distractions. It's easier to see and hear. We have cameras up close doing demonstration. In some regards, we can actually feel more connected. And of course, we can accommodate larger class sizes as well. And not on this chart, but what we found is surprising. We will probably train more instructors this summer than we would have if we had done in person. The sheer expense and ease of not having to travel has actually made it much easier and more readily accessible to more instructors around the country. So some good things that I think also in the instructors and schools may experience as they move forward. We've learned. But what we have taken away as we've been doing our virtual trainings, and they've been highly successful, is that instructors have oftentimes, almost in every training session, gone, I get it. This is how I want to teach my instructor, my students, right, when I get back to class. So we're, as we get ready for the start of the semester, I think one of our focuses will be helping our CTE instructors, who arguably may not have been on the cutting edge of change and technology here, really helping them get comfortable and learn some of our lessons learned and how to implement hybrid training in the year ahead. So we're looking forward to that, and ourselves have gone through the process quite successfully and hope to help our member schools do so as well. So next slide. And then finally, how are students responding to your return to in-person instruction? Students want in-person instruction. Now, two things about that. I think they want that instruction focused on lab time, and then the knowledge-based portion of it to be more flexibly scheduled and remotely hosted, both through synchronous and asynchronous learning, right? But the reason this seems to be a great formula, and we can talk a lot more about this during the panel, look forward to that, is that our CTE students have complicated lives. They almost certainly are working. They very likely have families and children. And, the idea that we have to have them come to class on a schedule that works well for us as educators and as schools, right, has always been tough. They have transportation issues, right, and so this idea of being able to offload a lot of that, both in synchronous and asynchronous patterns, coupled with maybe smaller in-focus lab time, we think can actually be a winning recipe in the long term and really help accommodate some students and drive better training, and actually maybe help have more students in our program. So those are a couple of our insights that we've learned. We look forward to sharing more of those throughout the panel, and we're so glad to be part of this and so glad to be helping our member schools and our affiliated schools, honestly, all CTE programs out there in the country, really transition in this time and deliver excellent results and maybe even improve the experience we had in the past. So thank you so much again, Craig and team, for having us on board today.
Well, thank you, Dan. I heard you struggling with the idea of the new normal, and because it seems to get a new revision every day, I think we'll just call it the most recent normal. But we'll trademark that and sell that. We have Bruce up next to talk a little bit about safety and screening protocols that can be useful in hands-on lab settings. So Bruce, why don't you update us on what's going on?
Okay, well, thank you to Craig and Craig, maybe we'll call Craig squared, for inviting me to speak. I got invited in this because of helping another school for their welding program. And during the pandemic, I've been helping various clients come up with what I call an acceptable risk. Now, my diverse background you heard about is really coming into play now, especially my biosafety background. And with the questions that were presented, I chose the following ones just because of that background. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? So the question is, what are the biggest worries about hands-on technology labs and how do you overcome them? So the number one concern, obviously, is going to be from an infection control perspective. You know, we don't want students, staff, faculty to get sick. The second concern that I put out there is that there's too much information out there and it's taken out of context or it's just plain wrong. And what happens is this will cause a panic or an undesirable response. And then just getting buy-in. I find that if people truly understand what the hazards are, then you can find out what an acceptable risk is, and buy-in becomes relatively easy. And even something, and this is something that's hitting the news a lot now, is people saying, I have the right to do this. And people don't understand the difference between a right and a privilege. And so when you start getting into that, buy-in becomes difficult. So where do solutions come from? Well, starting off, you know, is today's society, we have so much information going out there that's not being vetted. And a good example of that is back in March, the New England Journal of Medicine with the National Institutes of Health came out with this article talking about that the virus stays around for 3 hours in air and up to 2 days on different surfaces. And everyone got, oh, this is going to be around for 3 hours. If I walk by somebody, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to die. And the whole thing was just taken out of context. It was an experiment to say, how long does this virus stay in air? And there's a big difference between being viable and being infectious. And it's like, it's only minutes that it's going to be infectious, but the RNA can stay around for a long time. So people are really not understanding an article that went out without the full explanation. Then when you start talking about peer review, we used to always do that with any scientific journal. Someone would validate that that information was correct. And now it's someone thinks something happened and it's published. Most recently, just this month, a report came out of Wuhan, China, that the ventilation systems were where people were getting disease from. And there wasn't any data to back this up. And like, were there filters? Was it all recirculated? How much fresh air was coming in? And now people are thinking, oh, I'm going to get it from the ventilation. I need to have this kind of MERV filter and other things. I can talk for hours on ventilation. The disease itself, we don't know all of the effects of this virus. That's why it's a pandemic. That's why it's novel. What we do know is how it spreads. And that's where tried and true infection control methods are still working. And that's what we come back to, and we can come up with a good synergistic solution to make things work. Next slide, please. So the next question was, what are the biggest worries about, what is legally enforceable and what is a guideline? Okay, so people are like, what do I have to do? So unless something is specifically codified, it is going to be a recommendation. Your CDC are guidelines, and that's just it. They're not legally binding. There are some things that are temporary, some that are permanent, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. And then one of the things I have to deal with, people are asking me a lot of questions that are HR related or paid time off related, things like that, versus safety. And they overlap, but they are separate. Now, OSHA has its respiratory protection standard out there, and people think that there's a lot of changes in it. It's actually not that big of a change. But then there are certain specific mandates, like for the healthcare industry, And you have local governments are making their own mandates, like you're only allowed this many people in this county, but you can have more in another county. The FDA has been putting out what are called emergency use authorizations, like for testing. The EPA accepts their list N disinfectants without proof of effectiveness. And then there are certain laws that are out there already. California has the aerosol transmission disease standard, which actually relates somewhat to this. Virginia this Monday just passed the first law for COVID-19. And there are other things like the Safer at Home program that governments are recommending. And then, the payroll protection program is out there. So to know adherence, you have to know what's required. You have to know your own internal standards that might be more stringent. And you have to be aware of urban legends. Next slide, please. So, are there specific protocols for faculty to student and student to student interactions? This is sort of based on a welding kind of example. Do I have my own workstation that the student has, or are they going to share it? Are they having a welding face shield that has the respiratory protection built in? So find out what I have. Then you start coming up with solutions. Physical distancing, and I call it physical distancing as opposed to social. Why do we have 6 feet? What are my alternatives if I can't get from 6 feet? Can I position a student back if there's shared workspaces? What do people think about welding shields? And face coverings, people are going to have face coverings for the most part come in on their own. They have them, and if you don't have them, have the school supply. But this is becoming a new norm. And I'm sorry, Craig, I didn't use the right word for what the new whatever is, but this is something we can be looking at. And then the next slide is just my contact information is always in everything I do. You'll have those slides. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, LinkedIn will be a good way of doing it. I do a lot of training for safety professionals themselves, and I'm out there as a resource. That's why I'm into safety. So, and again, Craig and everyone else, thank you for having me as part of this panel.
Great, that was a great introduction, Bruce. Thanks. And Bruce, we became aware of Bruce through his work with one of our member institutions, College of the Canyons in California, and his work with their welding program to help consult with them to talk about standards and protocols and distancing and protections and screening and such, and cleaning especially. And so I encourage you all, as you think about your questions, my guess is a lot of your questions are very specific, and Bruce has a lot of very specific answers. So I encourage you to use that question box to go ahead and post your questions now as you hear the presenters, and get those on the table so that we can get them in front of our folks after our sponsor talk. So we really appreciated that input, Bruce. So now we want to hear from Ray, and we want to hear, we have 2 presenters today from Gateway Technical College in Wisconsin, and we wanted to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. One is from the kind of overall college leadership perspective, and that's what Ray's going to give us today. And so we're looking forward to your insights and hearing your initial presentation, Ray. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Craig. This is a pleasure to be here. I'm from Gateway Technical College in Southeast Wisconsin, and we're located in 3 counties there, Racine, Kenosha, and Walworth. So next slide, please. Yeah, and what I want to talk about is the silver lining that has come about because of the pandemic, and also some of the most difficult situations. So silver lining was most of our faculty had already gone through online training, and the reason for that was we've gone through new curriculum where we're trying to go to full-time and part-time curriculum sheets, so students were really student focused, and that caused us to think about, okay, we need more lab time and less lecture time. How do we do that? And one of the ways was through a training that we have offered, that Sealy it's called. Anyhow, it offered online training for our faculty. So all of our faculty but one was already certified. The next thing that happened was kind of out of the blue by an accident, but it was a great accident. 2 weeks prior to the pandemic, our director of our VP of IT said, hey, we're going to go and go to the Zoom instead of going on our Blackboard Collaborate, and we're going to do this rapidly. So literally, we actually got trained 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. So perfect timing. And then our lab spaces, our welding and our CNC, they were already working on virtual type things because they wanted to make sure that the lecture had impact. And to do that, you had to learn about those virtual tools. And I'm going to have actually a list of the virtual tools that we're using at Gateway in the fourth slide that you can see. And then the most difficult situations were communication and focus. When we first started this, everybody was excited about Zoom and they wanted to be in on the meetings. And as the months continued on, they got less excited about that, and focus was really hard to get. So we've had to make hard deadlines on things that normally we wouldn't have had to do. They would have just been natural had we had day-to-day interaction. So really a difficult situation there, but one we've overcome with more and more communication. So next slide, please. And then what are the biggest worries about hands-on technology labs? Social distancing and capacity were by far some of the biggest problems that we had to address. And social distancing we've done by limiting class sizes to around 12. Now there are some areas like CNC and welding where you'll see that we can naturally space people out. So that's what we do there, and we do that because a welding booth's already 10 feet from the other welding booth, so it just makes sense. And then we're required to wear masks on all campuses at all times. And this is actually now a state law starting tomorrow, so everyone will have to do that. The disinfecting and cleaning, that's how we overcame some of the other concerns we had. We actually pulled together our facilities team and our faculty. They worked together to develop proper cleaning and disinfecting routines. And our machine techs were in there as well because they didn't want the machines to be rusting and coming down. So they actually worked right along with them and developed great cleaning processes. And now the instructors are working with students to make sure that the student, not only at the end of every day would they clean up, but now they're going to disinfect and make sure they're ready for the next students that come through. Next slide, please. And describe some of the accommodations you've made. We've limited in the summer class sizes to 10 for labs, but in the fall, 12. Required, again, masks for everyone. Social distancing, again, we had that natural spacing with the machine, not the machine shop, but CNC and welding. And then we worked with faculty on those best practices for disinfecting and cleaning. Then the last slide is going to be just is all the tools that our areas have used. You'll see some for advanced manufacturing, mechanical, CNC, welding, and IT. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. The issues around student involvement in the disinfection and cleaning protocols is an important step, just like it would be for any operator in an industrial setting. And I think that that's a thing that we'll follow up on during our Q&A. Ray's colleague Matt is here to talk a little bit about how that actually gets implemented. So we're talking a little bit more about delivery issues here and exactly what's happening on the ground in terms of putting those programs on. So Matt Janison is here to talk about that. So we'll let him do his initial presentation. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Craig, and again, thank Craig McAtee too. Gateway has always found great privilege of being part of NCATC, and I've always learned a lot from the organization and view as a very important strategic alliance that we're part of. So we're happy to be here today to explain a little bit about what we're doing. If we go to the next slide. So some of our strategies just around to what Ray was mentioning, communication and things that were challenges. How are we prioritizing our return to instruction? So early on, we started looking at, we're the Gateway Red Hawks. So we devised a Red Hawk return plan. which is made up of about 5 different phases that started all the way back from the 1st of April and kind of bringing us through the fall semester, and just starting to, kind of outline in a matrix form some of the criteria. What are the state rules? What are the local rules? Again, for Gateway, we service 3 different counties in southeast Wisconsin: Racine, Kenosha, and Walworth. Each one of those counties are unique, and we have campus and locations in each of those 3 counties. So there's 3 different counties worth of rules and regulations you have to keep up with, in addition to local city ordinances. So it's always nice to have one place where you can kind of bring that together and then start to devise strategies that will work at all of your campuses, so you can at least have somewhat of a gateway plan rather than a 3-county plan. And in order to help, disseminate this and gather input, because we really wanted to make sure our faculty and staff and everybody involved felt heard with all of this, we started the Gateway Preparedness and Stabilization Committee. You can thank our president, Brian Albrecht, for all the fun names that we get for these committees. But ultimately, this was where, each vice president, there's about 10 of them that run the different areas of the college, selected at least 2 members from their team to be part of this. So all told, this is a group of about 30, actually about 32, I think, when everybody's there. So it's a little large for kind of a steering committee, but yet we really felt it necessary to have that much input and have people feel heard with that. So that included, faculty and staff and deans and directors and everybody from every aspect of the college and every division with the college. And they meet weekly for about the first hour or better with the executive leadership team. And we continue to use the Red Hawk return plan as kind of our guiding template. And we review that and we see where we're on in that and where we're going to need to change and move it. We know that what we wrote in April, isn't going to necessarily stay. So we've continually evolved that as, spring semester ended and summer semester started. And now as we transition to fall, we'll continue to update those different phases and see what criteria that we're meeting and kind of follow our plan to where we think we can get a safe return to students and help service our community and stakeholders as we're doing that. And really, when we looked at prioritizing the different programs of instruction, some of our programs have been online only for many years. Our accounting program has been an accounting on demand online program for years. So some of it lends itself very easily to continue doing what we're doing. And it just now is a newer marketing push, because now if you didn't know we had an online accounting program, here's an opportunity to be able to do that, not have to worry about the face-to-face and coming to campus. And then as Ray mentioned, we kind of looked at each area individually when we know as a technical college, a lot of our students want and desire hands-on learning, and a lot of our programs really require it. We can be as flexible in that lecture kind of areas we want, but ultimately, whether you're a nurse or a welder or an automotive tech, you're going to have to go and use the tools and use the equipment and run the machines to really learn how to be a skilled person in your trade. So looking at each one of those labs and just determining based on social distancing and the natural spread of the machines that are being used, we started looking at what a reasonable and safe limit would be for class sizes. You can see, and we kind of started out with 10 throughout the summer. And again, we're kind of increasing that to about 12. And in other areas like welding, where each student has their own welding booth and are fairly social distance under normal times, with a little more cleaning and disinfecting in between classes, we can safely sometimes go over that 12 number. But just as a guideline to make sure faculty and the public know that we are thinking about it, we are taking it seriously, and we're looking how to do this in a safe and professional manner. And again, a lot of what we've been doing is somewhat of a hybrid model, using Zoom, using Blackboard and other technologies to be able to do the lecture portion online, but then bring students in smaller groups if need be, sometimes splitting a class. As Ray mentioned, we've had a mask mandate on campus from day one, since early April when we first started coming back. And it does become a Wisconsin state executive order here starting August 1st. So we were a little bit ahead on that, but just providing those opportunities for our students to come and get some of their hands on. Next slide. So then just a little bit of where we were and kind of where we're coming. So we kind of, went to remote learning and working from home there at the end of March. But within a few weeks already in April, we were already starting to look at the essential businesses as defined by our governor and the local authorities, and started to re-implement and bring students back. We had a request from the Kenosha City and Racine City police chiefs. We were running and in the middle of a police academy class where most all of our students there, 20 plus, were already sponsored. So they were already employed and hired, and they were just, the chiefs were waiting for them to complete their program. So they requested very early that if we could bring that back in any way possible and start to get them through to do that. So we started doing that right away. We used May and kind of extended our spring semester to finish up any of the leftover classes that weren't able to get their hands on once we went to remote learning in March. So again, through the end of April, through the end of May, essentially, we kind of made up and finished up our spring semester. June, for the most part, started our summer semester. We stayed mostly virtual, but again, bringing students back in small groups to finish up hands-on activities. Anything that could be taught online was. Hands-on activities in small groups of 10 or under with masks were brought on campus to do that. And as we continue into the fall, that will be somewhat of the same priorities that we're going to implement as we're going through. Last slide. And then taking a look at specific steps as far as safety goes, as well as, how we're communicating this with our local community. Communication is always key, but especially in these kind of stressful and ever-changing situations, you really want to make sure that you're over-communicating in any way possible. All of our technical programs have always had a culture of safety, and safety has always been a key priority. Obviously, that's expanded and shifted a little bit now, just as it has in business and industry, into a little bit more of the health and safety areas. Part of your daily cleanup in your work area and space now will include disinfecting. And just as you're seeing that out in business and industry, we're trying to replicate that here at the technical college. So again, students going out, they will be familiar with that idea and kind of have that ingrained as, they do. Their business can't be successful without them, and they need to take some personal responsibility for their own safety and health. And here are the techniques that they can use to do that. Part of the GPS committee's charge was to make sure that we survey and directly talk to our local stakeholders. So we did specific surveys and focus groups with students, faculty, staff, and employers to see how Gateway could best serve them. So bringing that information back, having different subcommittees as part of that GPS committee, that group of 30 did a lot of work and brought a lot of information back that overall helped form the Red Hawk return plan. And then obviously our web presence, there's a COVID-19 banner right at the front page of our website that will link you to all the different questions, frequently asked questions, and latest information on the college. The college hosts an intranet site for all of our employees, so they can go and get all the specific questions answered, whether it's HR related or facilities related or specific to their programs. We have an online forum that anybody can ask questions, as well as they can bring their questions to the GPS committee members and sub-members that are part of that. So just encouraging as much as we can, faculty and all employees to open up and be open with your questions, and we'll address them as quick as possible. And the other thing is just, each division and department, depending on their primary customer base, we've been focused with meeting with high school administrators and teachers. We do a lot of dual credit. Last year we had over 7,500 students doing dual credit with Gateway. And now each one of our K-12s have somewhat of a different plan. So we have to be very flexible in that to see how we can support, where Gateway can lend its expertise, and how we can support not just the students, but those instructors in those areas. And then that is directly impacting our employers also. So we've been in very close contact with them, especially my team at the college that works specifically with employers and customized training. Lots of Zoom messages and phone calls, and just seeing how we can support and when has been really key to explaining that, Gateway is open for business, and we're here to support our community and to do it in a safe and professional manner. So I think that's it for my part. Craig, back to you.
That was great. I especially appreciated the idea of the culture of safety. Of course, this is a shared responsibility between faculty and staff and students, and that culture is really going to be important in taking this through the long haul. So that communication piece was very important, and I'm sure people will have questions about how you made that happen. And speaking of questions, I'm going to continue to encourage people to put questions into the question box, and we'll get to our Q&A session right after a word from today's sponsor. I sound like a radio announcer here, but Tony Neary is going to introduce NCATC's newest industry partner.
Thank you so much, Craig, and thank you to all of our panelists. We're really fortunate that in these very different and trying times, I happened to meet somebody from the team at EASE. They talked about the software that they have. We spoke a little bit more about NCATC, our mission, our goals, and our pillars, and we just thought that they were a great fit. So at this point, I want to thank EASE for being a brand new strategic partner, and for all of you attending our webinar at no charge today. That is thank you to their sponsorship. So I'm going to turn it over to Gavin from EASE, and please continue sending in your questions in the question box.
Thanks very much, Tony. So yes, hello, welcome. Thank you very much for allowing us to take part today. My name is Gavin Drake. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with EASE, and this is a subject that is very close to my heart. I've got a 17-year-old that is heading off to college for the first time next month. I've got a freshman daughter just starting high school. And so I've been sitting in on a number of these types of meetings with the University of Northern Colorado, 9 hours listening in on the school district in Douglas County here and their plans around reopening. So really a relevant subject, particularly for me right now as a parent too. So let me just talk a little bit about EASE and why EASE is kind of relevant to this subject. EASE is a software company based out of Southern California. Been developing software since 1986. You might tell from my accent, I am not from these parts, but I've been living in the US in Colorado actually for the past 10 years. And EASE specializes in what we call high frequency process verification audits. In fact, if you look at probably a whole load of those customers there, I dare say that a number of your students go on to work for some of the companies that we typically sell to. So historically, we've sold heavily into manufacturing and particularly into the automotive industry. And they use the EASE platform to audit manufacturing processes, safety, quality, and more. However, what we've seen since March this year is large numbers of our customers have been using the EASE platform for COVID-19 safety audits in order to be able to bring their employees back into manufacturing operations in a safe way. So why are they using EASE for these kinds of audits? Well, it's one thing to come up with safety protocols around COVID-19, social distancing, sanitization stations, temperature checks, but it's another to ensure that those things are being followed. And when it comes to COVID-19, it actually has a lot of similarities to quality in manufacturing. If you catch a quality issue in manufacturing early, there is far less cost to the manufacturer than if that quality issue escapes into their customer. You think about 500,000 cars being recalled, that has huge cost. And when you think about COVID-19, there is a significant lag time between when something happens that causes the transmission and when you actually discover that that transmission happened. You know, that could be 14 days after the event. So EASE is a tool that enables you to verify that your COVID-19 policies and procedures are being followed, but also gives you that early warning when you might have an issue. And obviously there are legal ramifications too. It's not just the health and safety of faculty and students. It's being able to prove and show that you actually had protocols, not just in place, but protocols that were being followed. So we do all of that through a mobile application that's available for Android and iOS. And that enables you to conduct audits of classrooms, common areas, visitor audits, self-assessments. And because the data is real time, you can immediately check and see where failures are occurring and take action to remedy it. And you could think about it really in terms of a checklist. If you're familiar with paper-based checklists, this is a mobile version of that with a lot more intelligence and capabilities. So with that, what I'm going to do is jump in and give you a really quick demonstration of the software. So right now you're looking at the Ease mobile app. I'm looking at a home screen here with KPIs. I can also see any audits that may have been assigned to me, any follow-up actions that have been assigned to me. What I'm going to do today is actually just jump in and look at a very simple sanitization and maintenance audit. And you can see here I've set the location and the type of audit that I'm carrying out. And this is a super simple audit. We've basically got 3 questions. The first one here, I'm putting in where this audit is taking place. This could equally be a checklist where you just pick where that location is. First kind of real question, I'm being asked whether or not floor markings for social or physical distancing are actually in place, or are they damaged or are they missing? In this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fail this question. I'm going to input some details around that failure and what the specifics are. And then I can go ahead if I want to, and I can actually capture a photo to show the evidence here. So I'm going to take a photo. I'm going to annotate that photo where I'm seeing the failures. In this case, no markings at all. And we can put in there what the issue was. And then I can actually go ahead and assign that to someone. So that could be me, and that could be something that needs correcting afterwards, or it could be something that I could correct immediately. In this case, I'm going to inform maintenance that we need social distancing floor markers putting in place. Move on to the next question. Have the classrooms been sanitized daily? I'm going to pass that. And then I'm going to get to finally here just submitting this question. So you can see a summary of the answers, a summary here of this non-conformance. I'm now going to go ahead and submit that. So this was a very simple example, but our customers are using this for things like visitor audits, for self-assessment audits. Have you been in contact with anyone that has symptoms? Do you have symptoms? Do you have a temperature? Very simple questions to far more complex ones that could be a deep cleaning maintenance audit that you're doing once a day or once a week. So I'll switch now across to the desktop web app version of the software. And here I've got kind of a more extensive configurable dashboard of data that I might care about seeing as a manager or an administrator. And we'll jump in and have a look at an actual audit, which is the one that we literally just did here. So you can see the audit findings. I can jump in and have a look at that annotated photo where I highlighted what the issue was. And we've got kind of an audit summary. I'm also able inside the system here to now see more detailed reporting, and everything I'm showing you is highly configurable. So for example, I'm looking at top failed questions, which I could tag up. So I can see my top failed question here is social distancing. But I also, next failed question is around sanitization procedures. I could look at that by location or by faculty grouping. So I can kind of see where I'm seeing the most frequent and common failures. And maybe that might drive me to improve training or other kind of corrective actions that I would put in place. We could also manage our question library inside of here. And we can have a look at, an individual question. You can see questions here that have been tagged up to enable us to do more analytics around them. And in this case, here's an example of a question. I can add in illustrations to show people what good, better, best looks like, and also what the response should be to that question. One of the powers of this system is the ability to automatically schedule audits. And so I can go ahead and set up different schedules for different kinds of maintenance or sanitization audits, and very easily assign out those particular question types and audit types to different people. So that was a really quick fly through the software. If you want to find out more about the software, happy to dive in and give you a kind of a deeper demo here so you can see exactly how that would work in your environment. I realize this may or may not have been something that you were thinking about. Perhaps checklists are a part of what you're doing for COVID-19 audits. But what we wanted to do is to put together an opportunity for some NCATC members to jump in and try this out. And so for the first 6 colleges that come back to me, we're offering you a 6-week pilot of Ease for $500. you'll get complete access to the platform. And as it says here, you'll get a dedicated customer success manager. We'll work through helping you set that up, set up locations, questions, reporting, and also set outcomes and targets for what you're looking for from the pilot, so that we can get to the end of this process and see whether that was successful for you. And of course, if you decide to move ahead on a more permanent basis, then we'll refund or offset that cost against kind of a future purchase. So if you want to find out more about that, go ahead, contact me. My details are on the screen, but I think we're also sending out this presentation afterwards, so you can get to those details. gavin.drake@ease.io. And I think beyond COVID-19, clearly given the types of tuition that you're doing, that example of our students wearing face shields when they're welding, they're exactly the same kinds of questions that our customers ask in a manufacturing environment. So I think there's an interesting parallel here, not just for COVID-19 safety, but also more broadly, particularly around equipment and labs and technical learning. So thank you very much for allowing us to participate, and wish you all the best, and look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gavin. If you need any additional information and did not get Gavin's contact info, feel free to contact us through the question box and we can share that with him.
Well, yeah, thanks, Gavin and Tony. That really illustrated in a very clear way how we can, as higher education institutions, leverage industry solutions. That there are solutions happening out there all the time. They may be with the companies that you serve, they may be with people across the nation, but that those often we look within higher education for our solutions, and in our labs, in a lot of cases, we're simulating work environments that are more common in other industries. So it's important for us to be able to leverage those solutions and apply them in a higher education setting. So we thank them for coming on board. We thank them for sharing their solution with us and their platform, and for offering to discount it for our members today. So Tony has some questions that have come in for our panelists through the question board. So
I sure do. And the first question here is from Jason Hill, who I believe is with your facility in North Carolina, right? And Jason's question for the panel is, what is the main disinfectant solution that you've been using for CNC sterilization and sanitization?
This is Ray. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can actually ask and get that. Bruce, you want to take it?
In general, just to talk about disinfectants, we have 4 or 5 that are effective for the virus. You have the bleach. That's not what you're going to use on a CNC, okay? You have hydrogen peroxide, which is usually designed for a whole room to go over. Both of these are corrosive. The quaternary and the phenolics work very well, but when I start talking about equipment, I usually want to go with the alcohol-based ones, because I'm not going to damage the electronics and it's not corrosive. So if you have that ability, I would say go ahead and use an alcohol-based disinfectant. The second choice is going to be more quaternary. The other things is just, there are a couple other questions, and I answer them ahead of time. With disinfectants, one of the things people say is, well, can I use a fogger, can I use a mister or whatever? And there were a lot of industrial hygienists that were saying, no, you can't, because it says you have to do it on a non-porous surface. When you actually go to the EPA literature on several of these, they actually say if you use a fogger and you follow these directions, you can use it on a lot of things, and it's a great way to cover a large surface like a CNC, and it doesn't corrode it, and it just sits down there and it hits your contact time. So that's just one way of looking at it for disinfectants.
Thanks, Bruce.
I could jump in too. I was just, when you asked, I kind of looked it up real quick, so I remember talking about it. So we use 2 Virex, and then we always have a big partnership with SC Johnson. So they have a professional disinfectant cleaner. I think that's actually what it's called, SC Johnson's professional for hospitals disinfectant cleaner, that we've utilized too. And then depending on the piece of equipment, kind of to Bruce's point too, obviously some of that could be potentially damaging to it if left on there for an extended period of time, which is why what Ray mentioned earlier too, we've had our faculty work with our facilities folks. So if there's an after treatment we need to put on after the appropriate kill time or whatever, having that chemical set, that we apply that to make sure we protect the equipment.
Great, thank you so much. And then this kind of ties in with the next question. Have you had any pushback at all from your faculty on doing any of this additional cleaning?
I can definitely let Ray talk a little bit about it too. There's been some concerns. And again, it's, you know, we have a lot of different faculty, right? From apprenticeship instructors that are essentially still in industry and teaching, you know, a little bit kind of to general education, you know, instructors who may have, you know, less industry experience than a lot of our other technical instructors. So it kind of depends on the instructor's background and their comfortable level with it. But by and large, for the most part, faculty have been understanding. If you go to Walmart or wherever, you know, even before COVID, right? They had hand sanitizer or the wipes that you wipe your own cart down with, and now it's more of a mandate. So you do have to take some personal ownership in this. And if you're out in business and industry, you know, that you're taking care of your own work truck or work van or workstation or whatever else it is. So for the most part, instructors understand that they have to be part of the solution, and that our custodial and facility staff are taking care of a lot of the common areas and the bathrooms and this and that. But when it comes to the specific classroom and lab equipment, that you know, faculty and students have to be part of that solution.
Matt, can you talk a little bit about how you extend that to students and what responsibility you give to them for their workstations and equipment and shared surfaces?
Sure. And again, Ray can speak to this too. Obviously, he has a number of students in that area, but you know, it's kind of part of that culture of safety now. So just before, when you would have to wear your own, you know, before COVID, right? You had your own PPE that you were wearing, whether it was safety glasses or gloves or whatever, depending on the task, and keeping your area clean, because you know, a messy and dirty and disorganized area is also a safety hazard. Now it's just kind of one level more of making sure that you're disinfecting, cleaning, washing your hands, wearing your face mask, and remembering that if you're, you know, you have an outbreak in your company and your company has to shut down, that doesn't do anybody any good. So you are here not just to protect yourself, but if you're working at a machine in first shift, you want to make sure that you leave that clean and as sterile as possible, because you don't want to infect the second shift, because as a company, you are all in this together, and you will sink or swim together also.
Right.
Great. We have a very specific question here. Can you provide safety suggestions for an inner city high school culinary program? It's a CTE class that is typically overcrowded. Also, is it feasible to reduce the amount of students in the class and develop a different way to provide meals for the community with each class?
Oh, that's a tough one, but
Thank you, Stuart.
let me take a crack at that one, because I had culinary for a while, and I think you could do this because you have stations. You have chopping stations, you have washing stations, you have baking stations, you have frying stations. And if you could isolate those far enough apart, I think you could rearrange schedules to have people rotate in and out as they clean everything and go to the next station to actually get the work done. So it could be done. It's going to take a little more coordination on that travel between the stations, but it can be done.
Let me go another way on that. With the culinary program I went over reviewed, instead of doing stations like Ray said, which is what I expected them to do, they actually have everybody working on the exact same thing at the same time. And most of it, a lot of it was done on plates, hot plates basically. And where the issue came in is when they were getting into the ovens. And so what became the limiting factor was, where do you get the spacing on there? And then you ended up having a number of students that you could have in there. And one of the things that works really well in terms of culinary, they have to understand standardization as part of their program. Leverage that. It works great. It really does. And so I like the rotation, because you can do that in almost any program. But if they're going to do all the same, then you're going to get down there to physical distancing.
The only thing
I would just,
oh, go ahead, Dan.
I would just like to kind of, it's an interesting thing. We see some of the challenges, not necessarily solution, but it brings up the, the challenges as we think about hybrid. That would be an area that maybe is not so great. And as an inner city school, one of the challenges that many schools are going to be facing is just the digital divide, right? So we think about, oh, well, the easiest solution is let's flip the classroom and limit the class size and have more in-person labbing. And I know some of the things we're seeing our schools wrestle with is it's not a good assumption necessarily that we can flip the classroom so easily for all of those students. So we got to keep that in mind. I know Gateway is, I think, Ray, probably one of the other fortunate things for Gateway is that you've implemented, a paperless environment for your students for many, many years. So I think you're more poised to, implement that, and all your students have laptops or smart books or something that they can connect with every day. And I think that may be one of those longer term things that we see other colleges really having to implement as a universal digital connection to the school for their students who may be disadvantaged in that regard.
Reflecting back on the EASE presentation from a few minutes ago, this is probably also a case where the industry probably has solutions as well, in the sense that everything that they're facing in that school is what every major commercial kitchen is facing in real life. And so finding case studies of how they're retasking workers and reconfiguring their kitchens are things that that I think you can bring into your classroom from your industry, because they're the consumer of your students in the long run.
Fantastic. So that was a great question. The next one is, Ray, specifically for you. First is, I'd love to see the software tools list one more time in your PowerPoint, but then the next one was, you had referred to natural spacing. Is this something that you can elaborate on?
Sure, and I think Matt did as well. As if you look at our labs, the CNC labs specifically, the machines are by themselves 8 to 10 feet apart from each other. So they have natural spacing that way. And our welding booths as well, they're 8x8 welding booths, so they automatically have the spacing between them. So the students wouldn't have to worry about that. Now, the only time we have to worry about it, again, is we used to have a process where all the students would line up to get their part that they're going to work on that day and then go into their booth. Well, now we have to stagger that. So we have had to change some things, but that natural spacing has made it so we could keep our counts up in those areas. So we literally have 18 students in our welding shop, and we have 16 students in our CNC shop.
Fantastic, thank you. The next question is, how do you disinfect welding gloves and jackets between sessions?
Actually, we don't. That's a student's PPE, and the students have to purchase those, and then they're responsible for those. They do have a locker where they locker those up, and that's the protocol that we use today.
And Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, that was before COVID too.
Right, that was before COVID. Nothing's changed there. Now, what has changed is we used to have 10 extra of everything for the person that registered today and came to class today. Well, the instructors asked me about that because they wanted more. I said, no, you know what? How about now you tell the student, go to the bookstore, get your kit, and then come into class with full equipment. So that's a change we had to make.
So what Ray and Matt said, having your own equipment's the best solution, but occasionally, as the question is alluding to, there's going to be shared equipment. And this is where I come back to the understanding of how is the disease transmitted, how long does it last? And in reality, I personally don't have much of a concern of the jacket, the gloves, of being infectious as they go through. And if you have an hour to let it sit, if there was anything that's infectious, it's pretty well gone. If you have the chance to put it outside, sunlight is an amazing disinfectant. And it's understanding it on an individual basis to be able to help the students and the faculty understand what the risk is. I think they'll find that it's quite acceptable. And the other thing is, when you have your welding gloves on, don't scratch your face.
Good advice, COVID or no COVID.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, no, you're right. It's no different between what you used to do and what you do now. And it's that you don't want to have all of these metals up in your breathing area. So it's just good practice overall, whether it's COVID or not.
All right, the next question's a little bit trickier, and that is, what is your plan when a student or faculty is infected with COVID-19?
I have a long answer after the other three talk.
Well, I can give you the gateway, process right now. So we have a system called the NCATC system, which we've used for years, and it's a reporting system where you can put in a report for any type of disturbing behavior that you see on campus. It's open to faculty, staff, and students. It's our one-stop shop for if you see something, say something type of situation. We're leveraging and using that. If a faculty member hears that, or if a student comes up with if they've potentially infected or are getting tested, they submit that. That goes to a CARES team on campus, as well as our HR department if it involves employees. And then from that part, we really our HR department really takes over in the case of the employee side of it. And even for the student side, most of that then goes to our county health department. So after that, the county health department will do all the contact tracing and everything like that. And then we have specific cleaning protocols in place to take care of the space that it was. And then we rely on the county health department to tell us, who's infected, do we need to shut an area down? And they walk us through the process of who we need to contact, who they're going to contact, and what is the most prudent way of moving forward for that specific, physical space.
Good job, Matt. I thought that was going to be the toughest question we had, and you nailed it. So.
Well, actually, there's a lot more to this one too, because like Virginia just came up with a new COVID law. They specifically state how you have to manage this case of who you're telling, who you aren't telling. You have confidentiality, you have HIPAA, you have medical records that all come into play. You have guidelines that change from CDC. Matt was talking about using the health department. I think, Matt, where you're at, the health department can still manage this, but in these hotspots in the United States, you've heard about contact tracing, and contact tracing's been around, long time back in, the 20s. Like when TB would come out or something else, people would figure out who got exposed. And the problem right now is this pandemic is so large that we can't keep track of who everybody came in contact with. One of the best things I've seen was a job hazard analysis from a construction company. When they have to have people in close contact working together, they're making sure they keep track of who they were in contact with to help manage what's going on in terms of a confirmed case. You have self-assessments, you have on-site screening. These are all things that come into play. And there are guidelines and examples out there that you can get of what are your response scenarios. At the end of next month, I'm actually doing a live interactive demo with environmental health and safety professionals specifically on this, because the way it's described, if you're a Star Trek fan, you'll understand the term Kobayashi Maru. And all right, I could see from the smiles who got that, but it's a no-win situation. So on this one, as much advanced planning as you can have and go through the scenario, what's going to happen, do it, because this is the hardest question, Tony, and it's the hardest question in real life to deal with.
Thank you. We're now getting the question about how long are your general online sessions? And Dan, I think this can go for some of your teacher training programs that you're doing as well, not just training students, but also how are we training instructors and faculty remotely?
Yeah, I'll tell you some lessons learned. So we thought a lot about this, and traditionally we would have 8-hour sessions, you know, in our train the trainer in person, right? We knew that was not going to happen, right? Having someone on a computer screen for 8 hours just was not going to happen. Life was going to get in the way. We were going to get interruptions and just the fatigue of doing this, right? It's just not the same experience. We debated early on with 2 hours. We felt 2 hours was pretty chunkable, but we have a lot of material, and that meant more sessions, right? Taking 40 hours of training over just that many more sessions, right? What we came up with, we experimented with 3 hours, because on those first sessions, we thought, well, let's give ourselves a little bit of an hour buffer just to make sure everybody's got the technology, and use that first hour as almost setup time. And what we realized is that 3 hours really was pretty adequate. Now, I will say breaks are really key. So every hour, just as if we were in person, we take a break every hour, a 10-minute break. And we were really concerned about people coming back, right? You know, we'd be concerned right now if someone were to walk away from their monitor, are they going to come back, right? Are they going to go make lunch or something, right? And you just never know how people are participating when they're not sitting right in front of you. A brilliant little thing we did was it's really weird. We just put a time clock on for 10 minutes on the screen, and with a countdown on it, and people are so good. We haven't, the 300 people we've trained, we haven't lost a single person coming back from break, and they always come back on time, which is different from in person. Whenever we give a break in person, I think Matt and some of the other folks on the line, it's like getting them back, you know, they're out maybe having a smoke or just talking about, you know, their lives because they're coming together. We always have a hard time. We've actually had easier time, but we found 3-hour chunks with breaks it's been a good balance of getting enough in, but not too much.
So a few more questions. Does anybody else want to elaborate on that? Oh, sorry, Craig.
What's that?
I said, oh, sorry, I was talking while you were, so.
Well, I'm interested to help with schools that are still making the decision about whether to come back face to face or not so much the how to come back, but the when and the whether. And so I'm interested in what kinds of triggers, indicators you are using or you have seen being used for schools to decide when it's time to move students in. Are those industry demand-driven triggers? Are they from the government and mandates? Are they student-driven? What do you see as the triggers to make the decision for hands-on, face-to-face, in-person training?
Was that for me? I can share a little bit about what we've seen, and I know the folks. Matt touched on some of it. Right, some of the things are just critical skills. The police force, you know, I think our communities have reached out, and I think that's the first prioritization. You know, and if there was a critical exam that they need to take. So I know in the aviation area, right, if you've got to pass your FAA exam before you can work, you've got to come in, and so some of those where there were critical things where the students had to come back, either because of need, you're a firefighter, you're a first responder. We'd see this a lot in healthcare right now, right? Probably, I think Matt and Ray would say one of the first things that probably never shut down or was the first to start would have been their health programs, right? And police and some of these super critical tasks. So I think that's what we're seeing driving. And then also if there were some critical things where they just needed to be in the lab to take an exam, to take their FAA exam or any high stakes other entry-level exam to them getting employed. Because remember, this happened, you know, for most schools, they were halfway through their fall semester, and so you got a graduating class of students, a cohort that's getting ready to go to work, and you don't give them that terminus certification that they might need. And so working with them to get them that last mile, you know, in their educational career so they can go on to employment would have been really cool. Those are some of the things we've seen on our side. Yeah.
So really being sensitive to those different voices of our wide range of customers is really important. And so it's a delicate balancing act between safety and meeting needs. And But I know that we've had people that are interested still in formulating that decision matrix, what it looks like to know what we're moving on. I know we have other questions on the line queued up, but I also know that we are at the end of our time for the panel. And so I'm going to encourage a couple of things. One is that every one of our presenters today is on LinkedIn, and I think that's a good way for you to reach out with them and connect. The NCATC group is a tight-knit group, and so those who are members know how to reach one another and ask questions and network and find solutions. And so we want to carry on the conversation even if we're ending this panel for now. I want to thank our panelists for the time that they've spent with us and the effort that they put into focusing their thought here for a short time, but in the preparation for this as well. I think we pulled off a good set of advice for our members to be able to either have confidence in the decisions they've already made or rethink some of the things that they're looking at. So appreciate your time. There would normally be a big round of applause from people, and I'm sure you can see it in the question box. But thank you all, each and all, for what you're doing today. And Tony and I are going to turn it back over to Craig McAtee for some other announcements.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig and team. I couldn't say anything better than Craig Lamb just did about the panel and the fielding of questions that Tony did. But I want to, before we end, want you all to know that we're trying something new that Mark Goldberg, another board member of ours from Oregon, has put together for us to continue these conversations in 3 different levels, success and opportunities, questions that you have more than you've had now, and also resources that you may want to share on what we call the NCATC Jam Board. So come on, Mark, and I think you can walk us through one of these examples before we wrap up today.
Sounds great, Craig, and just waiting to share my screen. But as you can see, these are virtual whiteboards, and in them you can, here we go. So you can grab a sticky note like this, and you can go ahead and share information. What's really important is putting your name so we know who it's coming from. So we can really make those connections with you. And so I'll just, for the wins and successes, offer up remote didactic content from industry partners. I'll save this. I can choose a different color for the sticky note. There it goes. I can move it around. I can make it bigger. And then there's space on a second board, a third board if we run out of space on the front one. So you just click here. But we'd really like to keep the conversation going. There are boards for each of the 3 areas, for successes, for questions, as well as resources to share. So I'll just do that one quick demo and encourage everyone to really add your voice there and keep the conversation going. And please make sure you include your name so we can really make those connections properly. There is a max on the number of individuals on the Jam board. I think it's about 50, so that's why we spaced it out. So feel free to check out all 3. And this will allow us an opportunity to continue to dialogue with each of you and learn from all of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Mark, for bringing us up to the 21st century and some of those tools that we've not used yet. I just want to make sure that, one, we recognize that the links to both of these you can look for in your handout selection on this webinar. There's a PDF there with the links embedded. If you don't get that, you can just go to ncatc.org very easily, and on our front page we've ended the registration for today's webinar, but we've put in exactly those links for the NCATC Google Jamboard for you to go to after the webinar ends. So I want to thank our moderator, Craig Lamb, our expert panelists, Dan and Ray, and Bruce and Matt, very much for their expertise. I think we could have gone on another hour with the questions coming in. I want to thank Tony Neary for question box management, and also our sponsor Ease. Gavin, thank you so much. That's perfect timing for a lot of people, I think, to consider your great software tool for auditing and truly tracking and proving to faculty, students, and parents, for that matter, that the colleges are doing what they say they're doing. You'll all be sent a brief survey in a short time with a link to view the recording of today's session, so you can go back and look at all those things that you might not have seen enough of, like the list from Gateway for tools will be there, of course. And then we'll take all the questions that we didn't get to and put them in a document and share them as we move forward with all the folks that were here on the